1940, a group of engineers at North American Aviation in Southern California sat at their drafting tables with pencils and slide rules in hand and started designing a new fighter aircraft. Just 120 days later, they test flew the prototype of their creation, the P-51 Mustang. The Mustang was fitted with a unique sounding Rolls-Royce engine and became what is considered to be the best propeller-driven fighter of all time. It had it all: power and speed, range, altitude, and maneuverability, the qualities needed to escort bombers over Germany in World War II, protect them from the Luftwaffe, and return safely to their bases in England and Italy. That airplane was the X is for experimental, XP-51. That plane became one of the best, if not the best, all-around fighter plane of the prop era. But the P-51 and its pilots helped change the direction of World War II as they escorted bombers over Europe and destroyed Luftwaffe fighters. One of the pilots who flew the Mustang was Bud Anderson. Today, he is the highest-ranking living American fighter ace with 16 1/4 air victories in the skies over Europe. After the war, Anderson became a test pilot at Wright Field in Ohio and what later became Edwards Air Force Base. One of the planes he flew in test was the XP-82, an attempt to make the P-51 into two P-51s. Anderson is quoted as saying, quote, "The thinking back then was, well, if one Mustang was great, let's put two together. It's got to be better," unquote. Well, that didn't work out. Maybe a good idea, but that's why design ideas turn into test flight. What works and what doesn't, what test flight is all about. Tom Riley is a master restorer of this XP-82. Ray Fowler is a master pilot. He has flown 3 tours in the F-16 in Iraq and Afghanistan and flew the XP-82. He can and does fly almost, if not all, of the airplanes parked here at EAA. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Here we go. I'm David Hartman. Thank you for being with us this morning. And this is Tom Riley in front of me. Welcome, Tom. This is his airplane. And I'm Ray Fowler. And Ray, you just heard his when I opened a couple of moments ago. So, good morning, all. Tom, with your experience and your years of over 40 years of restoring airplanes and 34 or more that you've restored, how unique was this experience for you compared to the other ones that you had restoring aircraft?
I've always been a bomber guy. I've flown a Mustang, flown a TBM, and so forth like that, but I've always been a bomber guy. Fly B-17s, B-25s, 24. I went to in 1992, I was invited to go and see the Socrata collection in Newbury, Ohio. And I went up there, and I walked in. It was an amazing collection of airplanes that Mr. and Mrs. Socrata, Walter and Margaret Socrata put together. And I was looking for bombers. And I saw the F-82B model 82 sitting there all intact. And I immediately fell in love with that airplane.
So F-82, for those of you who don't know, during World War II, it would be for pursuit, but that switched in 47 or 48, I think, to F for fighter. So that's why F-82 is what we're talking about. When, why, where was this airplane designed?
This was the stopgap for the P-51 Mustang after the P-51 Mustang. The original Mustang was escorting B-29s from Saipan or Tinian, one of the out islands, to Japan. We were losing a lot of Mustangs because they were fuel short. They were carrying underwing fuel. The B-29s would cruise at 330, the Mustang would cruise at 280 approximately. And they would, coming back to Saipan, there were a lot of them in the bottom of the ocean because they ran out of fuel. They came to North America in November 43 and asked Edgar Schmid, the head designer of the Mustang, who back in 1940, when he was designing the Mustang, he hand sketched a twin-engine Mustang. And his boss came to him and says, if you're going to do it, you're going to work for Lockheed or Boeing or something like that. So he just put it in his top drawer. Didn't forget about it, but it was there. So in 1943, Hap Arnold came and said, we need a twin-engine Mustang that's 50 faster, carries X amount of fuel, and has 6 hours longer range to escort the 29s. He pulled his drawer out and says, how about this? Hap Arnold looked at it and said, build it. This is November 43. And they had it first finished. This is the first to fly on the 15 April 45.
So how many of these were built?
There were 272 built. There were 22. There were 2 XPs. This is the second XP, but the first to flight. Because we can prove it was the first to flight because there was only one 1-hour flight with upsweeping propellers. Right now you can see the pitch on the props. They're downsweep. There was one flight and they couldn't make it fly. It kept going to the end of the runway and takeoff power. It would not lift off. It was because it was the upsweeping props would create an upsweep of air over the top of the center section, and the slab size of the fuselage trapped the air, bubbled the air, made it into a stall, which is not a stall when an engine stops. A stall is when it stops flying. So the center section wouldn't fly. So they eventually unloaded most of all the fuel out of it. They had 150 gallons of fuel, which gave them an hour and a little bit. And they yanked it off the runway at the end. It flew great when they pulled the throttle back. When they pushed the throttle forward, it was in a stall configuration, so it would stumble. So they took hundreds of pictures of the airplane with upsweeping props, on the second serial number, but it was the first one off the assembly line. So we can prove this was the first to fly.
So how many of these airplanes actually saw any combat?
They saw combat in Korea. They could not get on production prior to the aircraft before the war was over, or they took over closer islands where the Mustangs could successfully escort the 29s.
So how effective were they in Korea?
We shot the first 3 airplanes down.
Wow. And how long did that last, that they continued to use this airplane in Korea?
They used the 23rd and on, which were E models, or later versions. Backing up a little bit, there were 2 prototypes, which were Merlin powered. And then there were 20 B models, which were Merlin powered. And then they built 250 Allison powered ones, which are the ones that saw the combat.
So how long did they stay in combat?
From the very beginning of the war until probably...
Just like 1950?
1950, 51, they were replaced by F-86 Sabres.
And that's when the MiGs and the Sabres...
The MiGs, yeah. And they shot down the first 3 airplanes. Now in 1953, they all went to scrap.
All of them?
Well, all but 5. There are 2 that are in the Air Force Museum, which are B models, which are Merlin powered.
That's in Dayton.
And one of them is Betty Joe that flew non-stop from Hawaii all the way to LaGuardia. It could have gone to Iceland. It was it was 5,020 miles. Could have gone to Iceland, but they could not drop 3 of the 4 drum tanks. Someone had tightened down the swing braces. So they were stuck on their hooks. So it was full right rudder all the way and dragging along the drum tank. They still averaged 340 miles an hour going across the country.
So how many of these airplanes were scrapped? All but 5?
All but 5. There's one at Lackland Air Force Base, an Allison powered one on static display. There's one flyer right here. There's one flyer. There's a second one being restored by Pat Harker in Anoka, Minnesota, doing a magnificent job. His is Allison powered. And there's only 2 on civilian hands. And they were both saved from NACA, which was the predecessor to NASA. Now, this one went to NASA in July 1945, and it shot more bullets and dropped more bombs and rockets.
How did Edwards?
No, it was in Cleveland, Ohio.
Cleveland.
It was based in Cleveland.
Right.
So in November 49, it landed on an icy runway, skidded off the side, and buried a wheel in the ice and the mud and bent this intersection. And Walter Soprani, who'd been collecting airplanes for quite a while.
Now, who is Walter Soprani?
Walter Soprani is a man that saved so many of his airplanes. And by the way, his daughter, Sister Margaret, right there, and Sister Mary, and Margaret sitting in front of her are the 2 daughters of Walter and Margaret Soprani, sitting right there. So anyway, Walter saved 30 some odd airplanes in his backyard. He would go anywhere there was an airplane that was not going to fly anymore. He would take it apart and bring it to his farm there in Newbury, Ohio. He still has a bunch of airplanes here. So anyway,
Scattered all over everywhere.
no, they're all in one area. Yeah. So anyway, he went up there, and the scrappers there in Ohio at Cleveland were getting ready to very carefully took it apart with a chainsaw. The airplane was being scrapped, so Walter bought it, paid $300 for it. Didn't get the engines, didn't get the propellers, but he got everything else. So anyway, he brought it home to his farm, and a couple months later, I think that's the time frame, NACA came back and says, we need the airplane back. Why? All these 82s are going to Korea, and they have to be tested at instruction. So he worked out a deal. They gave him an F-84 Thunderstreak, something like that. Gave him an F-84, and they took back the whole airplane except for the left fuselage. This one, right back there.
So they traded it.
They traded it.
Yeah.
So they took the whole airplane back except for the left fuselage, and it didn't have the tail section. They took the wings, the center section, which had been cut, and the rear fuselage is the horizontal and the verticals. They tested instruction, and we thought all that was gone forever. So anyway, I went up there in 2000 after falling in love with the 82, the E-model 82, which was back in I sold a B-17 in 97, and I had the money in my pocket. I went up to the Sopranos and I said I would like to buy that 82. I sold it 2 days ago. And I didn't know another 82 existed other than in the museums. So another 10 years went by, and I was invited up there to do an IRS appraisal on an airplane in 2007. And I came across this fuselage sitting underneath some tin on the side of a building. And I said,
at Walter's house?
At Walter's farm, yes.
Yeah.
So I asked him, I said, I didn't know you had another Mustang that didn't have a tail section on it. And they put a 59-inch plug in it and make it longer. But that part was gone because they didn't have a tail section. So I said, I would like to buy this airplane from you. This one is not for sale. This is December 23rd. It's sloshing through the snow.
2007?
2007. I said, I would like to buy this airplane from you. That's not for sale. And he had all the parts taken off. He was able to take any parts that he got on bolt off of the right-hand fuselage. He took and put it in the house. So he had a lot of parts there. So, and I knew I was going to be able to buy the airplane. They said, we we know we should have sold you the other airplane, but we didn't. And we didn't hear from you for a number of years, so we figured you had disappeared. So anyway, he says, we promised, Miss Margaret, the wife, I always called her Miss Margaret, she did most of the dealing, or all the dealing. So she called me in March approximately, or April 2008. She said, well, come on up, we're ready to sell it. And this is the strange part. She had been offered, and I usually don't talk money, but she was offered $30,000 for the fuselage. And I said to her, it's worth a lot more than that. So from December until April, I went to anywhere in the country that I knew that I had parts. There was a crash in Alaska. Don Whittington had a bunch of stuff out of the scrap yard in Fairbanks where they had scrapped the remaining 13 82s that went to Alaska, which were H models with heated leading edge and all that, to operate in Alaska to guard against the Russians coming across. But in 53, they're all scrapped. He went up there after that and bought a bunch of parts. And then there's a woman in St. Pete that had a canopy, and another man in
Florida?
In Florida.
St. Pete, yeah, Florida.
Another man in North Carolina had a canopy. And that was unique. Someone tried to buy that canopy from us, and we'll give you thousands of dollars for a canopy. He says, no. He says, it's going to go with this airplane. Because I know it's going to go on. I said, well, how much do you want for it? He said, it's free. It's going to go on the airplane. So they called me in March or April. I went up there. And they said, I said, well, how much do you want for the airplane? She said, well, it's $60,000. And I say, what does that mean? I said, it's worth more than that. Knowing Walter had all the parts. I could not make Walter upset because he was upset about a previous sale to a Corsair. So I just figured he's the only person that's got the parts. So I held my finger up. She said, what does that mean? I said, it's worth more than that. And Walter said, never had anybody offer me more than something that I asked for. I'll tell you when to stop. So the figure went to 80, 100. And I said, okay, wrote him a check. He went throughout the house. He said, the landing gear is here. The hydraulics over here, the belly scoop is down in the coal cellar, here and there. He had endless parts. So we gathered up all the parts, put them in a container, shipped the airplane home, contracted with all the people to put down payments to for all the other parts, got all of them back, and then Walter would find more parts, They'd call me and I'd come up there with my truck, pick them up. And while I was up there, I looked underneath a pile of scrap B-52 parts. I said, they look like Mustang parts. They were the remaining 82 parts that had come back from NACA after they had crushed them. So I ended up with a complete airplane.
About from the same airplane.
Same airplane. So I ended up getting all the rest of the parts, and some of them were usable. A lot of them weren't because they were been run over by a bulldozer. But between going throughout the world looking for 82 parts and making a whole bunch, we ended up with a complete airplane.
So then you went to work to put this together. What was that process like?
Well, we hired a bunch of sheet metal people, and we're a sheet metal shop. And we worked on it for 11 and a half years. In the meantime, more people would read about, we'd have a new monthly news release that would go out. And then people would hear about it. They'd say, we have a thermal quadrant. We have this, we have that. Everything is magical about this airplane. Virtually nothing has gone wrong. One instance, I was walking into the crash site in Alaska. We could land the helicopter one spot on a 360-degree circle. There are only 5 parts on this airplane that are the same as a Mustang. Everything else is different. Same technology, but the parts were only 5. The canopies are different. We didn't have any canopies. So I figured we were going to have to make canopies for scratch. The airplane that had fatally crashed in Alaska, in Fairbanks, Alaska, right south of Land Air Force Base, was about a mile inland where we could land next to the river where the blades of the helicopter would not hit trees. So we landed there. Now, what were the chances of landing on that spot compared to anywhere else in a big circle? So we landed there, and I dropped colored tape on the top of the wispy trees where the wreck site was. It was found there by Dick Odgers many years earlier. Crashed there in 1949. Crashed there in 1949. So anyway, I'd stop and I'd spread the trees and see the yellow tapes. Compasses don't work up there. So I'm walking in, about halfway 1953 when they were doing away with the 82 from North American at Englewood, the head design person says, take all this microfiche from the B-25, the Mustang, and the 82, and bring it outside and burn it in a 55-gallon drum. The man took it, instead of burning it, put it in the trunk of his airplane, or the trunk of his car, and sold it to Lowell Ford in California, who presented me with the plans. It just goes and goes and goes and goes like that.
If this wasn't true, I'd say you made it all up. So at some point, you have to take all of these pieces and make this airplane. How long a process was that?
That was 11 and a half years and 209,000 man and woman hours. And a number of my employees and volunteers are here. We have a lot of volunteers.
Hey, look, raise your hands. Everybody who worked on this project, raise your hands. Yeah.
So we had an eight-person paid airframe power plant IA inspection authorization crew, and we worked on it for full time for 11 and a half years.
How much of doing this is passion, and how much is obsession?
That's hard to answer, but I've been in the business my 48th year now, and I love building airplanes that people say can't be done. And we had a pile of wreckage out of Alaska, and they looked at that and said, there's nothing there usable. I said, oh yeah, it is. A lot of it's copyable. You know, we spent a huge amount of money for non-destructive inspection, for X-ray and Magnaflux, and paying machinists to make new parts and stuff like that. I always knew I would get it done. It just how much time and how much money.
So in the process of putting it all together, were there moments when you started to think, uh-oh, we finally have hit a stumbling block here and we can't get past that?
Never.
Oh my gosh.
Never. One of the biggest problems was I had 20 plus pilots call me. They said, we want to fly the airplane. We want to be the first to fly. Now, I've flown Mustangs, but I'm not qualified to fly an 82. From the very beginning, I chose Ray Fowler. Everybody else going, yeah, but we have this, no, I'm choosing Ray Fowler. He will be the pilot. That was it.
Now, why is that? And this is terrific because this will tell you about Ray Fowler. Why Ray Fowler?
Well, the only thing he hasn't flown yet is a space shuttle. He flies everything. He's one of the most experienced pilots in a Mustang. You know, he flies Corsair P-17, P-24, FW-190, P-38, on and on and on. And there's probably 50 other ones. P-82. So I made a lot of people unhappy because I made the decision from the very beginning it was going to be Ray Fowler. I don't care what you say, it's going to be Ray Fowler. That's it. And that's what it was.
As a matter of fact, Ray, was that you flying the film we saw earlier on the jump?
That was 2 days ago, yes.
Oh, that was here.
Yeah, it was here.
He's the only P-82 pilot in the world now.
But there's only one P-82, so there's not a big demand.
So anyway, we now have 28 hours on the airplane.
A little over 20, I think.
Sorry, 28 hours and about 25 landings. And it's been amazingly squawk-free, except for we had a little small hydraulic leak in here this morning that we're addressing ourselves with, and they're working on it.
Let me back up for just a second. Bud Anderson, whom everybody here knows and who is here with us all week, where does Bud come into this from his test career?
Well, he flew this very airplane. He flew this very airplane.
A small world.
I can't tell you when, but the first 22 were stateside. This is the first to fly. They were held stateside as trainers and stuff like that. But the other prototype went to the big place on the East Coast, Norfolk,
Virginia Beach.
and it was scrapped in '53. But because of the spotters, this and many other airplanes survived.
So what did Bud have to say about his memory of testing this airplane?
It's fast. It's strange because you're in the left seat flying and you look to the right and there's another fuselage you're going to have a midair. But it's fast, it's heavy. It's heavier on the controls than the Mustang, but Ray can tell you all about that.
Right, right. So what happened? Was it last December 31st? Was that the day?
December 31st.
Just recent. 12/31, yeah.
I knew it was going to fly, and he knew it was going to fly.
I hoped it was going to fly.
Yeah. And it was a cold day, and I said to him,
Where was this?
This is Douglas, Georgia. That's where I'm based. I was in Kissimmee, Florida, and Hurricane Charlie had different ideas. There's Pat Harker sitting right there. Raise your hand, Pat. He's doing a magnificent job on an F-82 E model right there. It just goes. Pat has been very helpful to us because he had a complete airplane, and he would allow us to come up and take measurements and copy things and stuff like that. Without him, we'd be far behind where we are now. Thank you. So anyway, I said to Ray, I said, do a high-speed taxi. We have 6,000 foot runway. But if you think it's marginal, go. And I watched it lift off in less than 2,000 feet. And I was going to put it back down again. And I went, it's not going to stop. And he flew. Went around the patch a couple times.
So was the FAA involved in any of this, or you pretty much on your own?
Yeah.
The FAA was involved.
Oh, yeah. We were supposed to be here last year.